There is a secret your body has kept for millennia, not hidden in the stars, nor in the ruins of ancient temples, but in the soft, electric rhythm of your breath, the hum of your spine, and the silent song of your nerves. Modern science calls it the autonomic nervous system. Yogis call it Kundalini. The ancients of Kemet carved its echo into temples, encoded in serpents and spines, in the uraeus and the jed. But somewhere between MRI scans and pharmaceutical formulas, we forgot that the nervous system does more than regulate. It remembers. In this first chapter, we ask a radical question. What if awakening is biological? What if mystical experience is not an escape from the body, but a return to it? This is the nervous system they never wanted you to remember. Every nerve is a thread of ancient knowing. We often think of memory as cerebral, a function of neurons in the brain, storing and retrieving data. But memory lives deeper. Studies in neuroplasticity reveal that the body doesn't just react to experience, it rewires in response to it. Trauma is a kind of imprint. So is joy. So is awe. Each breath, posture, and subtle gesture sends signals down the spine, through the vagus nerve, and into the tissues. These become somatic signatures, non-verbal memories stored not in words, but in posture, tension, heartbeat. This is where Kundalini begins, not in fantasy, but in the raw intelligence of the spine. The ancient yogic model of Kundalini presents two subtle energy channels, Ida and Pingala, winding around a central channel called Sushumna, rising from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. What modern neuroscience reveals is stunningly parallel. The autonomic nervous system is split into two branches, the sympathetic, arousal, energy, and the parasympathetic, rest, healing. These mirror the Ida and Pingala. Rising up the spine, they braid a biological dance, one activating, one calming, until they reach balance at higher centers. In this view, Kundalini is not magic. It's the body's evolutionary potential, a dormant circuitry waiting to awaken, to synchronize the opposites and activate what lies beyond survival, consciousness. Among the most misunderstood components of the nervous system is the vagus nerve, a long, winding superhighway connecting the brainstem to the lungs, heart, gut, and even genitals. It is deeply implicated in emotional regulation, immune function, and spiritual experience. In breathwork traditions, especially those rooted in ancient Africa and India, slow, deep breathing, humming, chanting, and visualization stimulate this nerve. Recent studies show that such practices activate the parasympathetic response, lower inflammation, increase heart rate variability, and induce states of calm alertness, identical to meditative awareness.
But here's what modern science hasn't caught up with. These same practices were used in temples and initiatory schools as tools for transformation. The vagus is the serpent's path. It responds to vibration, and through the breath, controlled, reverent, conscious, we awaken it. Even science is complicit. Cartesian dualism, the split between mind and body, remains embedded in Western medicine. Emotions are pathologized. Consciousness is reduced to neurochemistry. and spiritual awakening, often dismissed as delusion or illness. But ancient cultures knew better. They encoded body-based maps into ritual, movement, dance, sound, posture. They didn't separate healing from evolution. Initiation was physiological. When we awaken the nervous system through breath, rhythm, and embodied presence, we begin to undo millennia of forgetting. To awaken Kundalini is to remember who we were before the amnesia of modernity. It is to reclaim the nervous system as a temple of fire and light. And this is not mystical fluff. In neuroscience, neuroplasticity proves that the brain and body can be rewired. Trauma can be undone. Energy can be restored. But not through pills, through conscious participation. The breath is the code. The spine is the axis. The vagus is the carrier. The pineal is the gate. Each of us carries the full architecture of awakening within. This is the nervous system that remembers, and this is only the beginning. What if your spine is not just a column, but a ladder to the divine? What if the breath is not just survival, but the password to hidden realms? In the chapters ahead, we will explore how this biological map becomes a metaphysical one, how the serpent rises, how the chakras awaken, and how ancient knowledge meets cutting-edge science. The next evolution won't come from outside. It begins within your own cells. Let's descend into the body to rise beyond it.
In every ancient system, from the Nile Valley to the Indus, from the Andes to the Himalayas, one truth is embedded in the sacred traditions. The universe sings. The ancients did not see the world as dead matter, but as a living symphony of frequencies. Vibration was the language of creation, and the breath, the first motion of life, was the sacred bridge. So what does this have to do with Kundalini? Everything. The serpent that rises through the spine is not merely a metaphor. It is a vibrational phenomenon. To understand Kundalini is to understand vibration, resonance, and how consciousness is a wave riding on the breath of the cosmos. In this chapter, we will decode how sound, breath, and sacred geometry formed the basis for ancient science, a science of awakening that modern physics is only beginning to remember. Imagine the universe as a vast stringed instrument. The stars, the planets, the atoms in your hand, all vibrating. In ancient Egypt, priests spoke of the Neteru as tones of the divine order. In India, the concept of Nada Brahma declared, "The world is sound." The Jed column, the spinal symbol of Osiris, was not just anatomical, it was acoustical. It represented the human being as a resonant pillar. In temple rituals, chanting and cymatics, vibration-formed patterns in matter, were used to activate states of resonance in the spine.
When resonance is achieved, energy moves without resistance. And when the spine becomes a tuning fork, the serpent awakens. The word for breath in many ancient cultures was interchangeable with spirit. In Egypt, the Ankh was not just a symbol of life, but breath itself. In India, prana means life force carried through the breath. In Greece, pneuma spirit, and wind. In Hebrew, ruach, the breath of God. Breath is vibration in motion. Each inhale is a sacred act of remembering. The ancients taught techniques of rhythmic breathing to create inner resonance. Alternate nostril breathing, deep diaphragmatic breathing, humming. Modern science now confirms what they already knew. Rhythmic breathing activates the vagus nerve, calming the nervous system. It increases heart rate variability, a key sign of emotional and physiological resilience. Breath entrains brainwaves. The breath doesn't just sustain life, it is the serpent's ride. Pythagoras spoke of music not as entertainment, but as medicine. The Egyptian priesthood used vowel sounds, harmonics, and even sacred silence to shape consciousness. Tibetan monks use overtone chanting. Sufi dervishes spin in rhythmic breath and mantra. All point to the same idea. Sound reorganizes energy.
The human spine, in this view, is a resonant antenna. When tuned by breath and vibration, the cerebrospinal fluid begins to pulse in harmony. This creates a wave that rises up the spine, activating the pineal gland, the biological third eye. At a certain frequency, this gland secretes chemicals linked to visions, dreams, even mystical states. Kundalini is not imaginary. It is neuroacoustic biology, and sound is the code. When vibration moves through a medium, it creates form. This is cymatics. The ancients encoded these patterns into temples, the flower of life, the jed pillar, the serpent coiled on the forehead, uraeus, the spiral, seen in nature from galaxies to DNA. These were not decorations, they were blueprints for internal architecture. The body was the first temple, the spine was the central column. The chakras were vibrating fields. Breath was the carrier wave. The pineal gland, with its spiral structure and piezoelectric crystals, was the altar flame. To activate Kundalini, the initiate learned to vibrate in alignment. Modern neuroscience is only just catching up. We now know that the vagus nerve runs from the base of the brain down the spine and into the gut, affecting mood, immunity, and consciousness. Brainwave entrainment through sound can induce altered states. The pineal gland has photoreceptors and crystals that respond to pressure and light. But the ancients already knew. They didn't dissect the body, they listened to it. They used vibration as diagnostics, breath as medicine, and sound as initiation. Kundalini, in this sense, is a remembering. It is the return to vibrational mastery. It is not a snake, it is a frequency. Breath is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the serpent that moves between worlds. In every ancient tradition, the breath was never just a biological function. It was a tool, a technology, a divine interface. The ancients called it prana in Sanskrit, ruach in Hebrew, pneuma in Greek, and ka in Kemet. Each of these terms transcended the simple act of inhalation. They referred to the animating force, the soul's carrier, the rhythm of the divine intelligence. When the breath was controlled, the body became a temple. When the breath was mastered, the temple became a throne. If Kundalini is the coiled serpent energy at the base of the spine, then breath is the flute that calls it forth. The serpent doesn't rise chaotically. It rises through rhythm, waves, spirals, pulses. This is why ancient breathing techniques always emphasized cadence. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8, or the triangle breath, or the breath of fire, or alternate nostril breathing. Why? Because rhythm activates resonance, and resonance awakens memory. The memory stored not in the brain, but in the nadi pathways, an ancient nervous system of light. Through breathwork, Kundalini spirals upward through the sushumna, weaving through the chakras like a serpent dancing up a flute of light. Each breath is a note, each note a frequency, each frequency a step toward awakening. The ancient Egyptians knew breath as sekhem, a power that could heal, build, or destroy. Initiates at mystery schools learned specific patterns of breathing before they were ever taught words. Why? Because the breath was the first language. Hieroglyphs for breath often appear next to symbols of gods and kings, indicating divine authority, not by sword, but by breath control. The uraeus, the serpent on the pharaoh's forehead, wasn't just a symbol. It was a biological activation, achieved through breath and sound. Monks in the Himalayas today still melt snow around them with tumo breath. Sufi dervishes spin while inhaling in rhythms that transport them beyond form. Indigenous shamans hum while they breathe to open portals of vision. All of this points to a buried knowledge. Breath is the forgotten password to the sacred inner temple. Here's where science and spirit converge. Modern neuroscience identifies the pineal gland as a tiny organ between the hemispheres of the brain, often called the third eye. In ancient Kemet, it was symbolized by the Eye of Horus, hidden within temple architecture and anatomical diagrams. When activated through breath, the pineal gland does not just regulate melatonin, it begins to release endogenous DMT, the so-called spirit molecule. Rhythmic breathing, especially deep diaphragmatic breath combined with states of stillness or sound, begins to change blood flow and cerebral spinal fluid pressure. These waves activate the pineal gland. The result? Visions, knowing, bliss, remembering. Not hallucinations, but access to the archetypal architecture of reality.
The vagus nerve is perhaps the most spiritual nerve in the body. It connects brain to heart, lungs to gut. It is the bridge between the conscious and subconscious, between thought and instinct. Every breath stimulates the vagus, but only specific breath work, slow, intentional, rhythmic, awakens its regenerative power. Ancient breath techniques balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, placing the practitioner into a state of divine coherence. This coherence is not just calm, it is vibratory alignment. It allows the inner temple, body, mind, and soul to begin functioning as a harmonic field.
This is the resonance required for Kundalini to rise without resistance. Imagine this. The spine is a temple pillar. The chakras are altars. The breath is incense rising upward. Each breath you take is an offering. Each exhale, a clearing. Each hold, a doorway. In ancient initiation rites, breathing patterns were the tests. Could you control your life force under pressure? Could you breathe through fear, through fire, through silence? If yes, the temple opened. Posture. Sit or lie with the spine long. Visualize the digit pillar, stable, eternal. Inhale 5 count. Pull breath deep into your belly. See a red serpent stirring. Hold 5 count. Feel it coil at the base of your spine. Exhale 7 count. Guide the serpent upward to your solar plexus. Repeat. With each cycle, feel it rise higher. After 10 rounds, enter stillness. Observe. You may feel heat, see visions, hear tones. Do not force it. Allow. Breathe. Witness. This is the breath of the serpent. This is the awakening of the inner temple. Modern science is rediscovering what the ancients knew. Breath heals trauma. Breath accesses memory. Breath alters perception. Breath invites transformation. In a world of distraction and noise, returning to the breath is an act of revolution. It is a return to sovereignty. To awaken the serpent is not to chase energy. It is to remember how to breathe as our ancestors once did, with reverence, with rhythm, with purpose. You are the temple. The breath is the key. The serpent is waiting. In the sanctum of the ancient mind, hidden beneath layers of modern ignorance, lies a temple not of brick and mortar, but of perception and radiant silence. This is the temple of neuroalchemy, the sacred convergence point where biology meets spirit, where chemistry becomes mysticism, and where the geometry of the soul begins to emerge like dew upon the forehead of the eternal seeker. The ancients spoke of an inner eye, the eye of Horus, the Ajna chakra, the seat of divine vision. But what if this was more than just metaphor? Nestled deep within the geometric center of the brain, protected by the thalamic embrace, sits the pineal gland. A tiny cone-shaped organ, no larger than a grain of rice, yet revered by spiritual traditions across Egypt, India, Greece, and even pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. Modern science calls it an endocrine gland, responsible for regulating melatonin. But this reductionism fails to account for the symbolism etched into temples, tombs, and scrolls. The Jed pillar and the Eye of Horus, when overlaid with cross-sections of the brain, map eerily onto the pineal region. Could it be that the ancients understood something we have long forgotten? that this tiny gland acts as a transducer of frequency, a receptor for luminous consciousness? The pineal gland is composed of photoreceptive cells similar to those in the retina. It is sensitive to light, not only through the optic nerve, but possibly through the body's internal bioluminescence. In altered states, whether through meditation, breathwork, or spontaneous activation, many report visions, glowing lights, sacred geometry, and profound unity. Some neuroscientists suggest the pineal may produce dimethyltryptamine, the DMT, so-called the spirit molecule, though definitive proof remains elusive. Still, the implications are staggering. A built-in stargate in the human brain, capable of modulating perception, time, and the sense of self. This inner eye does not merely see light, it emits it. Alchemy sought to turn lead into gold. Neuroalchemy seeks to transmute conditioned patterns into awakened insight. In this temple, breath is the bellows, the vagus nerve is the spined serpent, and the pineal is the philosopher's stone. Every breath taken in conscious awareness sends a signal through the vagus nerve, affecting heart rhythm, emotional states, and cognitive clarity. This in turn begins to synchronize hemispheres of the brain, increase coherence, and activate the pineal's crystalline matrix. The ancients seemed to know this. The staff of Hermes, the caduceus, the twin serpents, the winged disc, all represent the dance of dual currents along the spine, converging at the crown. In esoteric systems, this is where the inner temple opens, where geometry ceases to be static and begins to vibrate, where the architecture of the soul reveals itself. Within the pineal gland are calcite crystals with piezoelectric properties. This means they convert mechanical pressure into electromagnetic energy. This is not pseudoscience, it is physics. These microcrystals may act like tiny antennas, resonating with frequencies both internal and cosmic. When activated, the mind enters a state of harmonic resonance. Ancient mandalas, the flower of life, the Sri Yantra, the golden spiral, these were not mere decorations, but maps of internal states, blueprints for a geometry that vibrates in tune with the living universe. What you see within this temple is not fantasy. It is the reflection of a deeper vibrational truth, one that speaks in spirals, ratios, and the silent symmetry of light. The final mystery of the pineal gland is not in what it is, but in what it enables. When activated, this gland appears to allow perception beyond the local self. One may encounter archetypal images, beings of light, ancestral memories, or the deep silence behind all form. This is why ancient initiates went through darkness retreats, fasting, and breath rituals to clear the static of the mundane and allow the sacred frequency to emerge. In these states, visions are not hallucinations, but communications. Symbols are not abstractions, but revelations. Geometry is not math, but a bridge between what is and what can be. This is the inner temple. This is the living gateway, and it lives in every human skull. The temple of neuroalchemy is not a place one visits. It is a system one activates. Through conscious breath, vibrational awareness, and reverence for the sacred within the biological, we begin to remember. We are not machines. We are instruments, And the pineal is not just a gland, it is the tuning fork of the soul. In every myth of divine ascension, there lies a hidden warning. Not every spark of awakening becomes a flame. Not every seeker who touches the infinite comes back whole. There are thresholds meant to be crossed gradually, with devotion, preparation, and deep integration. But what happens when the doors open too wide, too fast? This is the untold story of those who walked through the fire of evolution unprepared. Across the ancient world, mystery schools and spiritual systems were designed not to grant enlightenment, but to prepare the initiate. From Egypt's Temple of Luxor to India's tantric lineages, the teachings were layered: physical, emotional, mental, energetic. Because without such grounding, the force known as Kundalini, the primordial energy of evolution, can become a storm. Modern science has recently begun to observe such phenomena, describing spontaneous awakenings of energy along the spine, accompanied by intense physical symptoms, burning sensations, internal tremors, insomnia, sudden bursts of weeping or ecstasy. Ancient cultures knew it well. They called it the Serpent fire, and its unleashing before the vessel is ready was seen as both sacred and perilous. Imagine the nervous system as a bioelectrical temple: wires, channels, nodes, and transformers. Now imagine plugging it directly into a lightning storm. Kundalini, when awakened without prior attunement or guidance, can surge through the system like a voltage, far exceeding its design. People report migraines, panic attacks, loss of identity, and the collapse of mental structures. In ancient Kemet, the priests of Ankh, mastery, spent years preparing their spine with breath, movement, diet, and sound to become a living Jed pole, a stable axis of energy. Only then could they awaken the Areus without fracturing the psyche. Modern seekers, however, may stumble into breathwork, psychedelics, or intense emotional release without knowing they are activating something far older than language. And, like overloading a circuit, the consequences can be devastating. What happens when light enters a house with broken windows? The soul, when caught between frequencies, between identity and expansion, between trauma and transformation, can split. This is not metaphorical, but energetic. Ancient shamans called it soul fragmentation. Symptoms include disassociation, feeling not here, intrusive thoughts or visions, sudden identity crises. In modern clinical terms, this could resemble psychosis, but in ancient medicine, it was seen as an incomplete transformation, a soul initiated into a higher octave of reality, but unable to reintegrate into the world of form.
The fire was real, but the container cracked. In Egyptian myths, even gods must enter the duat, the underworld, to be reborn. Osiris, the dismembered king. Ra, who journeys through the night. Awakening is not linear. Those who force open the pineal door without stabilizing their lower centers often find themselves unable to function in ordinary reality. Grounding becomes difficult, emotions spiral, and the very gifts they glimpsed, visions, light, ecstasy, begin to feel like a curse. In Kemet, there was a phrase, "The light that burns must be housed in stone," which is to say, consciousness must be rooted,
Awareness must inhabit a vessel. Without that, even divine perception becomes madness. But all is not lost. The ancient science of alchemy was never just about transmuting metals. It was about reintegrating the self, turning fractured light into a unified sun. Practices such as deep breathwork, slow movement like Kemet yoga or Qigong, reconnecting with nature, trauma-informed therapy, sacred silence, all serve to help the nervous system catch up with the soul, because the soul may glimpse the stars in an instant, but the body walks slowly. The dyad must be rebuilt, the circuits reforged. The serpent must learn to coil and uncoil with rhythm. This is not regression. It is sacred recalibration. In every initiatory tradition, there is a descent. The descent is not failure. It is the fire that tempers the sword. If you or someone you know has experienced an overwhelming spiritual awakening, you are not broken. You are becoming. But becoming requires the art of slowness. Let the spine breathe. Let the breath ground. Let the fire be fed, but not unleashed without form. The serpent awakens, yes, but she also learns to dance. And in that dance, evolution becomes embodied. They said the serpent would return, not to crawl across the sands of ancient deserts, but to stand tall with a spine like a staff of light. This is the story of what happens when the ancient currents of energy that shaped gods and kingdoms return to flow through modern human bodies. When the solar serpent rises, not from myth, but from Nero, illuminating the nervous system, igniting memory, and triggering the blueprint of divine consciousness dormant within our biology. And it begins where most science ends. At the intersection of biology, myth, and soul. Throughout ancient civilizations, Egypt, India, the Andes, Mesopotamia, the solar serpent was never just a mythological creature. It was a symbol encoded in temples, myths, and body practices, a carrier of energy, wisdom, and renewal. But what if it was more than a metaphor? What if it represented an actual energetic pattern within the human form? One that modern science has dismissed because it cannot be measured with standard tools. Within esoteric traditions, the serpent rising is not a belief. It is an initiation. It is the release of dormant potential stored within the spinal axis, moving upward in spirals, stimulating centers of memory, perception, and transcendence. Neuroscience has begun to explore the concept of neuroplastic evolution, the idea that the human brain is not fixed, but capable of transmuting its own architecture through breath, vibration, visualization, and intention. Ancient practices, from Egyptian spinal breathing to yogic pranayama and Andean humming rituals, were designed to do exactly this: rewire the nervous system to support states of higher awareness. So when the ancients spoke of the solar serpent returning, they may have meant a stage of human evolution in which this energy would awaken naturally within more and more people. The pineal gland is photosensitive. That much we know. It responds to light. But what kind of light? Research into biofotons tiny packets of light emitted by cells, reveals that the human body communicates using more than just electrical impulses. It uses coherent light. In other words, laser-like information, beamed within and between cells. This is the same principle behind ancient claims that the pineal gland is a gateway to other dimensions, not through fantasy, but through frequency. The solar serpent is said to rise as the spine becomes aligned and the breath becomes rhythmic. When these conditions are met, the pineal gland emits light internally, a bioelectrical activation that may correspond to the visionary states described in spiritual awakenings.
Such activation can be intense, not always beautiful, but always transformative. In tribal and temple cultures, this awakening was guided. Rites of passage, sacred teachers, geometry in stone and sound to hold the body through the transformation. Today, most experiencers are alone. The return of the serpent often begins with chaos, sudden shifts in perception, nervous system dysregulation, dream intrusions, intense emotional purges. Why? Because the body is adjusting to a new rhythm, one tuned to cosmic coherence, not cultural convenience. Modern life is not built to support evolutionary fires. Wi-Fi, but no wisdom. Data, but no decoding. So, when the serpent returns, it cracks the shell of old perception. And if the system isn't prepared, the light can feel like destruction. But it isn't. It is a dismantling of what is not real. A shedding. A return. Modern biology sees evolution as slow, random, reactive, but ancient initiates saw it differently. They viewed consciousness as primary and biology as its instrument. Kundalini, then, was not a spiritual phenomenon alone. It was a latent biological function, activated under specific energetic and environmental conditions. A sacred stressor, a divine overload, the signal that the current human operating system has reached the edge of its usefulness and a new one is being installed.
We are not ascending out of bodies. We are learning to embody light. This is not escape, it is infusion. The solar serpent teaches this. The body is holy. The spine is a ladder. The brain is a prism. And the pineal is the sun that never sets. You will know the serpent is stirring when your body begins to shake during breathwork or stillness. You dream in languages you do not know. Your spine becomes warm without movement. Light appears in the inner eye. Your emotional purges do not break you, but renew you. These are not pathologies, they are passages. They are not signs of madness, but signs of memory returning. This is what was hidden. This is why the serpent was demonized. Because to awaken this current is to become sovereign. Not in belief, but in biology. Not in theory, but in vibration. In the end, the return of the solar serpent is not about temples, texts, or timelines. It is about frequency. When enough bodies begin to resonate with this inner fire, culture changes. When enough nervous systems remember their divine design, the grid shifts. We do not wait for the serpent. We are its form. We do not worship the sun. We are its vessel.
And as this realization anchors into the collective body, a new form of humanity is born. Not post-human, but re-human, recoded, remembered, lit from within, alive with the song of stars. The serpent never left. It waited until we could finally hold its light without fear. And now it is returning through us.